Now we're going to set up Redux. So I have a bit of a comment here. So we will use Redux as a global state for our application. So we will need to store logged in users information such as JSON Web Token in the Redux state so that we can easily access that information in many different pages later. So for that, to start using Redux, we need to install this package. We need to install Redux, React Redux, which will connect React with Redux, and then we can use this DevTools extension, which will let you see the Redux state in the Chrome browser. All right. So for this one, obviously, for this one, you need to make sure you have installed the Chrome extension for Redux. Okay, so we'll go through all this. So let's go ahead and install these packages first. So React Redux, and the DevTools extension. Okay, let me stop the server for now. npm install Redux, React Redux, and then Redux DevTools extension. Make sure you have no typos here. You can visit the npm official page for these packages as well. All right, so they're done. It's pretty quick. Now let me start the server one more time, and let me go and work on the Redux setup. So we're going to do that in our index.js, which is the top level here component that is wrapping the app, which has the entire application here using the routing system. So let's go to index. So here, first thing, let's import these packages that we're going to use to create Redux store. So one, we're going to import from React Redux and Redux. So that's one. Next, let me write these steps. I think this will really help you understand. Next one, we're going to create user reducer function. So we're going to use reducers to update the state, and these reducers, they are basically a function. So once we do that, we're going to combine the reducers, combine multiple reducers. We might not only use one user reducer. In a bigger application, you might not just store user information in the state, but you might put some other information as well. So in that case, you will have more than one reducer. So how do you combine them? I will show you that using the combined reducer. In fact, it's really easy. There is a function that comes with Redux, and then you just pass the different reducer to that function, and that will combine all of them. All right, so that's that. Number 4, after that, we're going to create Redux store. And then number 5, we're going to provide Redux store to the entire app. The whole point of creating Redux store is we want to be able to pass the state values to all the applications. So we can just pass here, and this will make it available to all the apps. And not just that, it will make the state available, it will allow them, you will be able to update the state. So you will be able to dispatch a function that will update the state as well. So you'll see how all that works. So that's number 5, and that's pretty much it. So let's go through these steps. So number 1, let's import. So we need to import, let's just write Redux first, so that VS Code gives us some hints which will be much easier to type. So import, we want to import create store, and we want to import combined reducers from Redux. Next, we need to import provider from React Redux. Import from React Redux. So that is called provider. Next one, we have installed this DevTools extension, so we can import that as well. So import from Redux DevTools extension. So the name of that is compose with DevTools. So we need to use this function as well. Perfect. So we got all the inputs necessary to create Redux store. Now our next task is to create a reducer function. So let's write here const auth reducer equals to, so it takes a state which we can give a default value of empty object and action. So if you're new to Redux, just be patient. It can feel a bit confusing, but once we start using these functions, it's going to be really easy to understand. Especially with hooks, it's much easier. So reducer, the way it updates the state is it takes the state and you will dispatch some actions. So each action will have the name and payload. Payload means data. So each time you dispatch some action, you will be giving some data as well. So based on the action type and the data, which is also known as payload, you can update the state. Okay, so let's not worry about it too much, and let's see how it all works later. So with the reducer function, we use switch statement. Just like if else, it's similar. Switch. So switch, we're going to get the action type. So like I said, each action will contain type. So each action is going to be an object. So each object will have the type property and then the payload property. So type, for example, you might dispatch a type called, it's a string, all right? It's not variable, it's just a string. Maybe you will call it logged in user. So you might dispatch that type, that action type with the payload with the actual user information. So you might send the user information that you receive from your backend or your server. For example, name. So name, maybe Ryan, and role, maybe seller. So something like that. Let me cut this comment from here and let me put here on top. Okay, so that was a little bit of explanation about the action, but you will see how it actually works when we actually use them. Okay, so here in the switch, let's switch the action type. Let's see what we get. So we can use case inside switch. So let's use a string here, logged in user. So for example, if we give this action with this type, then what we can do is we can do something in the state that will update the state. So for example, return, we can use object spread. So whatever we already have in the state, we spread out, and then we also spread out whatever we got as a payload. Okay, so that is going to be action dot payload. So we're returning the state, and let's spread out using 3 dots spread operator. So this way, both the object, whatever we have in the state, and whatever we got, they will get merged. All right, so instead of overriding, we just are creating a new object. All right, and then we finally use another case as well. So we need to use another case. If user is logout, let's use all caps so that it is identical. So if the case is logout, then we're going to just simply return action dot payload. Again, by default case, we always return the state. So this is our auth reducer. So if we are getting the action with the type of logged in user, then we can update the state with whatever payload we get. If we get the logout, then we just update the state with whatever payload we get. Okay, so once we do that, let's go to the number 3, combine multiple reducer. So at the moment we just have one reducer, but later we might have many, so we can create one reducer. Let's call it root reducer, which will combine all the reducer. For example, this is one reducer, you might have more than this one. So const, let's call it root reducer equals to combined reducer. So we have that function, we import that from Redux, and we just use the object syntax here and then give the name, the key, let's call it user, and the reducer for this one is going to be auth reducer. Okay, later you might have another one called post, and then that will have post reducer. So that way when you access the state, you can easily access state.user, and that will give you the state. Okay, so that's a reducer. We can combine the reducer here. And now let's go to number 4. So number 4, we want to finally create a Redux store, because we have everything necessary to create a Redux store. We need a reducer function, which we have, so we can go ahead and create a store. Let's call it store, put it in a variable store, and to create a store we have the function we get with Redux, create store, so we can use that. So create store, this is a function, and you pass some arguments. The first argument you can pass is root reducer. This is important. Now second argument is optional. Since we want to use this DevTools, we can pass that as a second argument. We need to execute because this is a function. Perfect. So this is all we need to create a Redux store. So we import, we create a reducer function, we combine the reducers, and we create a store. Finally, just creating a store is useless unless we can provide to our app. So that's not a problem. We can use a provider component that comes with React Redux to provide the state for the entire app. Okay, so here let me use provider, and let me wrap our app with provider, and here the store, we need to pass the store with the prop name store, and the value is also store. Alright, so this way we created a Redux store, and we provide it for our entire application using the provider component. Now we can give this a try in the next lecture, and then maybe we should even move them to a separate function, because later when you have many reducers it will grow big. So it's always a good practice to move them to separate files. Alright, so we're going to do that as well.